There was a saying in the world, God gives you what you hate the most. Not long after school started, the homeroom teacher had arranged for Tan Duat to sit next to her, hoping that she could tutor the weaker student and that they could make progress together. At that time, Tan Duat had no objections. With an arrogant look, he carried his bag and walked over to where she was and sat down. He even said, "Classmate, we may sit close, but our hearts are distant. Don't try to get close to me. I already have someone I like." Back then, Quach Phuong had thought he was not only a poor student, but also very shameless. She really wanted to laugh, and in fact, she did. Tan Duat was so embarrassed that he became angry. "What are you laughing at? Let me tell you, the person I like is Ngo Nhan Ting from class 12-1 next door. After graduation, I'm going to marry her." Quach Phuong nodded and replied, "No girl would marry someone with such poor grades and a limited knowledge of the law like you. When you graduate, you'll only be 18, which isn't old enough to register for marriage." Tan Duat was left speechless. Quach Phuong felt that the Tan Duat during their high school years was the best version of him. There was something endearing, rebellious, and passionately youthful about him. He was the complete opposite of the quiet and reserved Quach Phuong, like a disruptive note that turned her whole life upside down. The Tan Duat 10 years later had become mature and composed, but he was excessively cold. His coldness gradually froze her heart day by day, eventually filling it with despair and sorrow. After the day they switched seats, Tan Duat continued his irregular attendance. Sitting next to her, he didn't say another word, only silently resting his head on his arms to sleep. There was a moment from those times that still made Quach Phuong's heart uncontrollably race whenever she looked back on it. Under the ever-changing spring sunlight, faint yet warm, Tan Duat lay down with his head tilted, revealing half of his angular face. His long eyelashes were like fan blades. He basked in the light. A layer of iridescent glow covered his body. The sight was so beautiful that it was hard to put into words. Quach Phuong could feel her face heating up and her heart fluttering strangely. For a moment, she truly thought Tan Duat was an angel. Perhaps Quach Phuong and Tan Duat would maintain this neither too close nor too distant relationship as deskmates until graduation. But as luck would have it, one day, Tan Duat placed a notebook in front of her and made a serious proposal. "Classmate Quach, I need you to tutor me and help me conquer the battlefield. If my grades improve, I'll definitely reward you handsomely." Quach Phuong looked at him skeptically. "Are you serious?" Tan Duat, "Absolutely serious." Later on, she found out that Tan Duat had been criticized by Nhan Ting. Nhan Ting said that her ideal type was a knowledgeable man, and coincidentally, Tan Duat didn't have a speck of it. Since then, Quach Phuong began to supervise Tan Duat's study routine 24/7. Every day, besides working part-time and handling her own homework for the early university entrance exam, she had to find study materials suitable for Tan Duat's foundation. It wasn't a big deal, because Tan Duat had only lost his roots. She just had to teach him from the beginning. However, she soon discovered that Tan Duat was actually very good at learning. Teaching him was easy, but he was lazy in his daily studies. Moreover, it wasn't that Tan Duat was bad at every subject. Quach Phuong affirmed that he was better than her in English and could even communicate fluently in the language. As time flew by, Quach Phuong and Tan Duat's relationship evolved from a distant deskmate bond to a closer friendship. Occasionally, Tan Duat would turn to chat with her for a few sentences, teasing her beyond the usual dullness. He had said that she only knew how to bury herself in her studies, as if she was killing her youth. But Tan Duat was wrong. Because of him, Quach Phuong's youth was thoroughly beautiful. But the next 10 years were completely dark. As the movie reached the scene where Lu Cam Duong faced disciplinary review in front of the entire school, he admitted to writing love letters to Lang Nyat Nyo. Quach Phuong suddenly smiled at this scene, then turned to ask Tan Duat, "Tan Duat, the time we spent being each other's deskmates, could that be considered friendship?" Tan Duat turned his head indifferently and asked in a non-committal tone, "What do you think?" "I think if we hadn't gotten married, maybe you and I could have maintained a friendship. At the very least, it wouldn't be as cold as it is now." Quach Phuong's face showed no clear expression, though the light in her eyes was somewhat dim. Tan Duat responded, neither quick nor slow. Yeah, maybe so. How cruel could time be? Quach Phuong, this exam I ranked 12th in the entire class. It's all thanks to you. Tan Duat happily held the score sheet in his hand. Quach Phuong was about to congratulate him, but before she could say a word, Tan Duat had hugged her. This spontaneous hug was very brief, lasting only 3 seconds, but it left Quach Phuong dazed, a daze that lasted for 10 years. Yet in their 3 years of marriage, they never had another hug. If there was any physical contact, it was when Tan Duat was so drunk, he would pin her down and have his way with her. In the midst of ecstasy and pleasure, Tan Duat would call out Nhan Tin's name, choking up. Quach Phuong had also felt a suffocating pain, as if someone was holding her head under freezing water, constantly on the verge of death. After sobering up, Tan Duat would remind her to take contraceptive pills. She could only nod in resignation. Quach Phuong had no right to blame Tan Duat, because this marriage was something he never agreed to in the first place. Quach Phuong, quickly look into the camera. A classmate held out a camera and panned it towards her. 3 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Tan Duat and Quach Phuong were now in their final year of high school. In addition to the intense atmosphere of exam preparation, the class was also busy passing around scrapbooks. Some students had even brought cameras to film their classmates, like reporters interviewing people on the street. Quach Phuong, what's your biggest dream? Quach Phuong smiled gently and gave a startling response. To become the second Bill Gates. Just as she said this, Tan Duat walked into the classroom. When he heard what she said, he had burst out laughing, clutching his stomach. Quach Phuong, there's no way your dream can come true. Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard. Can someone like you, who's always buried in her studies, drop out and still become successful? Tan Duat was right. Quach Phuong couldn't achieve her biggest dream, because after getting married, she had chosen to step back and support Tan Duat from behind the scenes. Her daily life revolved around the kitchen, cooking meals, and doing laundry. She meticulously sorted Tan Duat's clothes for machine washing and hand washing, and cooked according to his preferences, even if it meant making dishes she was allergic to. The classroom atmosphere became even livelier. The classmate who held the camera jokingly asked her, "How about sharing a smaller dream with us, Quach Phuong?" A gust of wind rustled her long hair as she rested her chin on her hand, her voice dreamy. Then it would be to marry the love of my life. Unexpectedly, that wildest dream of hers had come true. How ridiculous the twists and turns of fate were. Quach Phuong had hoped that her high school years would pass peacefully. She could be friends with Tan Duat and help him with his studies during class, and then after school, pass by the yard to watch him play basketball. In high school, Tan Duat was very popular. Every day, his desk was filled with love letters. Some of the girls from the lower grades, knowing that she was his deskmate, had even asked her to pass their love letters to Tan Duat. Despite being pursued by so many people, Tan Duat was only devoted to Nhan Tin. To ward off all other admirers, he had blatantly confessed his love for her in his self-reflection paper. He even intentionally let it spread to as many people as possible. There were times when Quach Phuong felt truly jealous of Nhan Tin, because she didn't have to do anything to make Tan Duat fall madly in love with her. Her existence was the most significant thing in Tan Duat's life. Once, while Quach Phuong was correcting Tan Duat's test paper, she had casually asked, "Tan Duat, do you like Nhan Tin that much?" "Of course, I've liked her since I was a little kid. Tell me, do you think my love for her is as vast as the Atlantic Ocean?" Tan Duat laid down on the desk and lamented, "Quach Phuong, if I confessed to Nhan Tin at the coming-of-age ceremony, do you think she would agree?" Quach Phuong's hand trembled. She couldn't control her strength and ended up pressing too hard on the pencil tip, causing it to break. Her eyes darted away in panic, and she laughed. "Someone who's as rude and unscrupulous as you even knows how to worry? Why not? That's because you haven't fallen in love yet, so you wouldn't understand. Just being near her makes my arms and legs go weak, and I start babbling." Tan Duat grabbed the pencil in her hand. "My God, you really ruined my pencil, Quach Phuong." Quach Phuong calmed down, looking at the test paper, and answered his earlier question. "Nhan Tin will definitely agree." Tan Duat happily leaned back in his chair. I think so too. Being friends was fine. At least they could chat for a bit and discuss worldly matters. But this simple thought of Quach Phuong was soon ruthlessly shattered by reality. Near the coming-of-age ceremony, a shocking secret came to light. It turned out that the school beauty, Nhan Ting, was not the real eldest daughter of the Ngo family. For 18 years, she had been like a cuckoo occupying another's nest. The real eldest daughter had been lost, living a hard life without parents. When the Ngo family couple came looking for her, Quach Phuong felt a mix of emotions. She had imagined countless times who her parents might be and what they did for a living. Had they abandoned her because life was too harsh? Only that she never imagined having such a distinguished background. Quach Phuong was taken back by the Ngo family to be recognized and returned to her roots. She lived in a grand house, ate delicious food, and wore beautiful clothes. However, she vaguely felt like a guest in someone else's home. Because the Ngo family loved Nhan Ting so much, they had kept her as their adopted daughter. Logically speaking, she could understand that blood ties could not completely dictate affection. There was a difference between a daughter who had been cherished and nurtured for 18 years and a biological daughter who they've never met that had suddenly appeared after 18 years. Finding her parents was already a great blessing. She never dared to hope for more. But facing her mother's conflicted gaze, her father's suppressed sighs, and Nhan Ting's indifferent expression made her feel extremely suffocated. She felt stifled in her own home, a place that was rightfully hers. Quach Phuong received many things she could never have dreamed of before, but in exchange, she had lost the most important thing to her friendship with Tan Duat. Quach Phuong, I wish you had never appeared. Why? Your appearance has ruined Nhan Ting's entire life. Quach Phuong, as of today, you and I no longer need to be friends. That summer was truly unforgettable. Not because of the beautiful sunshine or the joyful laughter, but because of the cruel words coming from Tan Duat. Tan Duat, even if the whole world turned its back on me, it was still not as frightening as being abandoned by you. To love someone was to allow that person to hurt you. This pain had lasted for 10 years until her life itself was broken. How many cycles of 10 years did a person have in their life? Ever since she was acknowledged by the Ngo family, Tan Duat had stopped talking to her. One day, she saw him move his things to another classmate's desk. They were only 3 desks apart, yet she felt that the distance between them was as vast as the entire world. Faced with Tan Duat's estrangement, Quach Phuong showed no unusual reaction. She studied when she needed to study, ate when she needed to eat, and slept when she needed to sleep. It was as if Tan Duat was just a passing stranger to her. But only Quach Phuong knew that while studying, her tears would soak the paper. While eating, her eyes were silently filled with tears. At night, she would bury her face in her pillow and cry until she was utterly exhausted. She really wanted to ask Tan Duat one question. Was it my fault that the nurse made a mistake back then? In this world, no child wished to be born alone and abandoned without any support. Tan Duat had never seen Quach Phuong being beaten until her limbs were bruised, only able to endure it in silence. He had never seen an exhausted Quach Phuong being hospitalized from working nearly 12 hours every day. Tan Duat had never seen how much Quach Phuong loved him, to the point of breaking her own heart, with wounds upon wounds. That was why he believed Quach Phuong had taken away Nhan Ting's family, that Quach Phuong was greedy for the things Nhan Ting deserved. Nhan Ting. If God granted her just one day to become Nhan Ting, would Tan Duat love her for even a day? On the day of the coming-of-age ceremony, the atmosphere was filled with excitement and hope for a bright future. Yet Quach Phuong felt empty inside. It was also during this ceremony that Tan Duat had prepared an elaborate confession for Nhan Ting. There were balloons, fragrant flowers, and everyone's blessings. Nhan Ting, I've been waiting for 18 years. I don't want to wait any longer. Will you agree to be my girlfriend? Nhan Ting, after we finish university, I will propose to you again. The Tan Duat of that time was the most gentle and warm-hearted version of Tan Duat. Unfortunately, Quach Phuong never experienced that side of him even once. Nhan Ting covered her face and burst into tears. A beautiful person crying evoked such emotion. Amidst the enthusiastic cheers and support from everyone, Nhan Tin nodded in agreement, holding hands with Tan Duat. Quach Phuong was nestled into a corner, wearing a beautiful blue dress. She smiled wistfully and silently wished Tan Duat happiness from afar. That day, there were two people deeply in love and one person who had her heart broken. Later, after the university entrance exams, Nhan Tin, who always ranked in the top 3 of her grade, naturally got into a top-tier university, while Tan Duat, with slightly lower grades, managed to get into a reasonably reputable university. In this complicated web of relationships, Quach Phuong was the foolish one. Quach Phuong was indifferent to most things happening around her, but there were some matters she was stubborn about, such as loving Tan Duat. When the time to fill out university applications came, Quach Phuong had resolutely chosen to study at the same university as Tan Duat. She knew he loved Nhan Tin and that they were a couple, but she still wanted to indulge in her unrequited love. She only wanted to watch him move forward, to see him happy with Nhan Tin, and had never once thought of interfering with their relationship. If she couldn't forget, she would just continue to remember. Someday, after witnessing enough of the love she could never attain, she would naturally let go. Quach Phuong felt that all women in this world should be like Nhan Tin. They should prioritize their own interests, work hard, and improve themselves without ever changing for a man. Throughout her university years, she witnessed Tan Duat coming and going tirelessly for Nhan Tin, regardless of the time. Only women who loved themselves as fiercely as their own lives were the ones who encountered people willing to do anything for them. She thought that after graduation, Tan Duat and Nhan Tin would end up together. But suddenly, rumors began to spread about their relationship falling apart. She didn't know if the rumors were true, but several times when passing by a bar a few hundred meters from the school, Quach Phuong saw Tan Duat silently downing one beer after another. There were moments when Quach Phuong wanted to approach Tan Duat and ask if he was okay, but in the end, she always chose to quietly walk away. She had no right to interfere with other people's love affairs. Only those involved could find and resolve their own issues. Before the rumors subsided, the Ngo and Tan families made a shocking announcement. Years ago, Grandpa No and Grandpa Tan had made a pact to have their grandchildren marry to unite the two families. They had even written a marriage contract for the two children. The Ngo family previously only had one granddaughter, Nhan Tin, but now it was Quach Phuong. The Tan family had more grandchildren, but Grandpa Tan decided that it was Tan Duat who should marry her. Grandpa Tan's health was failing, so he demanded that the two register their marriage immediately after graduation. That day at the old Tan family house, both she and Tan Duat were shocked and couldn't believe it. However, Tan Duat had reacted even more strongly than she did. He stood up and vehemently protested against it. In front of the two families, he declared that in this lifetime, he would only marry Nhan Tin. At that moment, she felt the wound in her heart, which had not yet healed, burst open and bleed. The pain spread throughout her body. Tan Duat was Grandpa Tan's most beloved grandson, and Tan Corporation ultimately had to be handed over to him. But to stand firm in the board of directors, he needed not only Grandpa Tan's support, but also a strong backing. Who else could that backing be but the Ngo family? If Tan Duat were allowed to marry Nhan Tin, what significance would it hold? During this tense standoff, Nhan Tin received an acceptance to become a graduate student, and she hurriedly left abroad to study. It wasn't until Nhan Tin had set foot on a new horizon did the news finally reach Tan Duat's ears. Tan Duat was depressed for several months, under the threat from Grandpa Tan that if he refused to marry her, he would lose his inheritance, and under the pressure from his family, Tan Duat finally agreed to marry Quach Phuong. On the day they went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to register their marriage, Tan Duat had said to Quach Phuong, "In this life, the person I wanted to marry the most is someone I can't hold a wedding with. Now, whether I marry you, the eldest Miss No Phuong, or even someone else, it's all the same to me." The movie I Want Us to Be Together was gradually coming to an end. Lu Cam Duong died in the cold snow. His notebook fell from his body. One page read, "If I die, don't tell Lang Yat Nhieu." The wind blew, turning the next page, and revealed, If I were still alive, I would definitely marry her." The cinema echoed with the sounds of heartbreaking sobs. Women leaned on their partners' shoulders, and men comforted their girlfriends. Quach Phuong, however, remained unusually calm, not shedding a single tear. She blinked and then asked Tan Duat, "Do you really love Nhan Tin? 3 years ago, if you had just given up your inheritance and flown abroad to see Nhan Tin, you could have definitely married her. Tan Duat, you love Nhan Tin, but you also have your own self-interests at heart." Her tone was calm and soothing, but to Tan Duat, it was not so easy to listen to. In the dark night, Tan Duat sneered, looking coldly into her eyes, and spoke clearly with each word. "Because I love Nhan Tin, I must give her the best of everything and make sure she does not lack a single thing." Tan Duat turned his gaze away from her and continued, "Quach Phuong, do you know the difference between love and not loving? It's that I can endure hardships with you, but I can't allow Nhan Tin to suffer even the slightest bit." Quach Phuong lowered her head and laughed. "I see. I understand now, Tan Duat." The play was over, and the people had left. It was past 9 in the evening when Tan Duat drove back home from the movie theater. Quach Phuong sat in the passenger seat, unaware of when she had fallen asleep. Her head was slightly tilted towards him, her long hair gently brushing against her cheek. Tan Duat looked at her with conflicted eyes. This woman always evoked a sense of vulnerability that tugged at one's heartstrings. Without hesitation, Tan Duat shook Quach Phuong's shoulder. "Wake up, we're home." But all he received in response was silence, the night enveloping them in its stillness, with only the occasional car passing by. She remained eerily tranquil, so still that she seemed like a lifeless body. "Quach Phuong, Quach Phuong." Tan Duat frowned, a sudden wave of concern rising within him. He carefully placed a finger under her nose to check. She was still breathing, but it was as fragile as a thread. "Quach Phuong, stop playing around. If you keep this up, I will ignore you," Tan Duat said irritably. Quach Phuong still did not move. If she were truly acting, then she would have been an exceptional actress, playing the role perfectly. Tan Duat curled his lips disdainfully, leaving her in the car as he stepped outside. After taking 3 or 4 steps, he slowed down and eventually stopped. He stood there conflicted for a while, before deciding to go back and carry Quach Phuong, who was in a deep sleep, into the house. He didn't want to be accused of being a man who killed his ex-wife after their divorce. Turning on the bedroom light, Tan Duat laid her on the bed, threw a blanket over her, and went into the bathroom. By the time he had finished his shower, it was already 10 o'clock. Quach Phuong was still sleeping soundly like a corpse. Tan Duat couldn't understand it. She spent most of her days at home. How could a single visit to the movies leave her so exhausted? Tan Duat shook his head. He lay down with his back turned to her and closed his eyes to sleep. In the middle of the night, Quach Phuong woke up from the familiar pain in her lower abdomen, a twisting ache that made her heart wrench. Quach Phuong's entire body was drenched in sweat, with strands of hair sticking to her cheeks. She turned her head and saw Tan Duat sleeping, so she bit her lip, trying not to let out any sound of pain. Her small hands clenched the hem of her dress until it was wrinkled. Using all her strength, Quach Phuong dragged herself closer to the head of the bed and opened the drawer to get the bottle of painkillers. Trembling, she hastily shoved the pills in her mouth. She then leaned back against the headboard and tried to regulate her erratic breathing. This bout of pain had lasted longer than usual and was much more painful. After an unknown amount of time had passed, Quach Phuong finally breathed a sigh of relief. She dragged her bare feet off the bed and headed to the bathroom. After removing her makeup, Quach Phuong looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the pale and haggard woman in front of her. She raised her hand to touch the face reflected in the glass, slowly stroking it as if to comfort her frail body. Tears silently flowed down from her eyes, 1 drop, then 2, until they became uncontrollable. Quach Phuong desperately tried to hold back her sobs, biting her pale lips until they bled. The blood dyed red, stark against her skin, looked very strange. She never thought that she would die. Despite the hardships and suffering Quach Phuong endured as a child, she had always hoped for a better future. She thought that as long as she tried, worked twice as hard, and gave her best, then God would reward her. Yet, in the end, Quach Phuong found herself empty-handed. Her parents were cold, her marriage was meaningless, and the only thing she had was a cruel disease that tormented her every day. Quach Phuong never blamed her parents for loving Nanting more than her, nor did she ever blame Tan Duat for being loyal to Nanting. She only regretted that she had appeared too late in this life, and happiness had slipped from her grasp long ago. A single step too late had ruined a lifetime. After a while, Quach Phuong emerged from the bathroom. She walked over to Tan Duat, pulled the blanket over his shoulders, and adjusted the air conditioner's temperature. She sat down facing Tan Duat and looked at him for a long time. She wanted to reach out and stroke his hair, but her hand, hovering in the air, eventually fell back down helplessly. Quach Phuong didn't dare. After Quach Phuong moved to lie down beside him, did Tan Duat finally open his eyes. He hadn't been asleep at all. Quach Phuong's words in the movie theater had left him tossing and turning, on the verge of going mad. No matter what he did, he was unable to sleep peacefully. Tan Duat, of course, knew that Quach Phuong was unwell, but he simply thought she had a stomachache. She had been suffering from stomach issues for a long time, so Tan Duat didn't react or ask any questions. It was just that when Quach Phuong had sat in front of him, Tan Duat suddenly felt such an immense pressure that he didn't dare to breathe. For the past 3 years, no matter how much care and concern Quach Phuong showed him, her actions only made Tan Duat feel disgusted. He thought that she was being fake to try and please him. But today, Tan Duat felt something different, like a vague pain in his chest. The next morning, Quach Phuong sat in high spirits at the dining table, waiting for Tan Duat. When Tan Duat had just put down his chopsticks, Quach Phuong suddenly leaned forward and happily suggested, "Today is Sunday, how about you take me shopping?" Shopping? Tan Duat was afraid he heard wrong, so he opened his mouth and asked again. Quach Phuong had never shown any interest in shopping before. She was still wearing the clothes she had bought years ago. Wanting to go shopping today was as unusual as the sun rising in the west. Quach Phuong smiled. "Is that so strange?" "Not at all. If you want to go, that's fine." Tan Duat took a sip of his coffee. "When do you want to go?" "Right now." Quach Phuong grinned, her eyes narrowing in delight. Half an hour later, the two of them arrived at the shopping center. Quach Phuong excitedly went from store to store, taking anything that caught her eye. It wasn't long before she realized that everything she had picked out was men's clothing. Quach Phuong quickly stuffed all the clothes into Tan Duat's hands. Tan Duat frowned. "What are you doing?" "Try them on." "You're really troublesome, Quach Phuong." Tan Duat clearly had no interest in trying on clothes. Even though he called her troublesome, Quach Phuong didn't show any signs of being angry or upset. Instead, the smile on her face grew even brighter. "Come on, just try them on for a moment. Have you forgotten what you agreed to, Mr. Tan?" Tan Duat reluctantly let Quach Phuong push him into the fitting room, his expression clearly displaying dissatisfaction and impatience. A moment later, Tan Duat stepped out wearing a dark blue suit, meticulously tailored to fit his masculine frame. If not for the dark, sullen expression on his face, the ensemble would have been perfect. The nearby saleswoman couldn't help but exclaim, "So handsome," before quickly covering her mouth. Quach Phuong nodded in satisfaction. "You're right. My husband is not only handsome, but also a perfect clothes hanger. No need to try on more. Just pack everything in this size for me." "Miss Ngo is quite generous with my credit card," Tan Duat sneered. Quach Phuong touched her nose and said, "Since we're about to divorce, can't I take advantage of your wealth a little more? And besides, I bought this all for you." Quach Phuong's voice was small and quiet. Tan Duat looked at her with cold indifference. "So what? Did I ask you to waste time on these things?" Quach Phuong, feeling awkward, lowered her head and clasped her hands behind her back. He was right. Everything over the past 10 years had been her choice. "All right, it's all my fault." Quach Phuong gently pulled Tan Duat towards the women's section, her voice soft. "Don't be angry. Help me pick out an outfit, and then we can go home." Without a change in his expression, Tan Duat casually grabbed a white dress and tossed it to her before turning around and walking towards the sofa in the store to sit down. His demeanor was high and mighty, as if he were doing her a favor. Quach Phuong said nothing. her hands gently smoothing out the white chiffon dress as she silently walked into the fitting room. "Tan Duat, do I look good?" Tan Duat heard her voice and reflexively raised his head. For a moment, it was as if time had come to a halt, and Tan Duat's pupils briefly trembled. Quach Phuong was wearing a white dress that was cinched at the waist, extending past her knees, with a fitted bodice and flowing sleeves. The chiffon fabric that draped over her body was as soft as the celestial silk fairies wore in heaven. Quach Phuong's features were not aggressive to the observer. They exuded a gentle sense of beauty that was easily memorable. At that moment, Tan Duat had to admit that Quach Phuong indeed looked like a princess whose identity had been stolen. But ultimately, she still fell short of Nanting. Regardless of who was the actual princess, the one in his heart would never change. Tan Duat quickly regained his composure, and the momentary feeling of surprise disappeared. He replied nonchalantly, "Not bad." Quach Phuong happily said to the saleswoman beside her, "I'll wear this outfit." "Yes, thank you, valued customer." Leaving the shopping center, Quach Phuong silently gazed at the city from the car. Lowering the window, she savored the touch of the breeze on her skin, cool but calming. To be alive, it was truly wonderful. At this moment, Tan Duat turned on the radio. Hello to all listeners tuning in to our daily storytelling program. Today, we bring you a story from a Miss Today Phuong. Please listen in. Today Phuong? What a coincidence. Her name was Quach Phuong. The radio continued broadcasting the sweet voice of the female announcer. "I am Today Phuong, and my husband is Hao Kiet. We've been married for 10 years and have a 7-year-old son. Hao Kiet was my first love from high school. Back then, he was clumsy and naive. I liked him for a long time, but he never realized it. It wasn't until I was about to give up on this unrequited love that Hao Kiet said to me, 'Today Phuong, I feel very strange. Every time I get close to you, my heart races and my limbs go weak. A Dan said that feeling means I like someone. Today Phuong, I think I like you. A Dan also said that if you don't agree to be my girlfriend, I'll surely die of longing.'" Tan Duat glanced at Quach Phuong's face, which had turned rosy from laughing, and felt strangely panicked. At that moment, I was both happy and amused. How could there be someone so foolish in this world? After that, the idiot Hao Kiet and I had a relationship that lasted from high school to college graduation, and then we found stable jobs. It finally ended with a perfect wedding. Of course, throughout that time, we had many arguments and moments when we wanted to break up. But because in this world, only Hao Kiet was meant for Today Phuong, and Today Phuong was only meant for Hao Kiet, we stayed together. 10 years of marriage, I felt very happy. But now I have discovered that I have terminal cancer, and even with treatment, I won't be able to live for long. There won't be another 10 years for Hao Kiet and me. At first, I was very desperate and unwilling to accept it. But thinking back, most of the time I had spent living in this world has been very happy. I only regret that I won't be able to see our son grow up, get married, and have children. I can't grow old together with Hao Kiet. Hao Kiet, if you hear this on the radio, remember to live the rest of your life for me. Today Phuong has only ever loved Hao Kiet in this life, and in the next life, I will come to find you again. Quach Phuong's chest felt like it was being squeezed tight, making it hard to breathe. Today Phuong, like Quach Phuong, had cancer. However, Today Phuong was luckier, having lived a short life filled with happiness. As for Quach Phuong, happiness seemed truly out of reach. Tan Duat was displeased and turned off the radio, wondering why he had to listen to such a sentimental story in the first place. "Tan Duat, there's an amusement park up ahead. Let's go play for a while." Quach Phuong enthusiastically placed her arms on the car window. "Are you a child?" "Yes." In the end, Tan Duat had to go along with Quach Phuong's wishes. The damned 7-day condition. After today, there were only 5 days left. He was curious to see what other antics Quach Phuong could come up with. The amusement park was always crowded with people, and Tan Duat had to hold Quach Phuong's hand to prevent her from being pushed and getting lost. Quach Phuong was like a child discovering the world for the first time, finding everything around her fascinating. Tan Duat, puzzled, asked, "Do you need to be so excited? Haven't you ever been to an amusement park before?" Quach Phuong paused. "Never. In our senior year of high school, I told you that I wanted to go to an amusement park once. Don't you remember? I have no recollection, Tan Duat replied indifferently. Quach Phuong continued enthusiastically. That time you even said you'd take me to the amusement park to ride the roller coaster as a reward for tutoring you. But then a lot of things happened, and you stopped talking to me. That promise was left unfulfilled. Oh, that happened? He genuinely couldn't remember. It's okay if you don't remember. It was a long time ago. Because if you didn't love, then you wouldn't care. This was a truth that was very clear to Quach Phuong. It's not too late to play now, Tan Duat said nonchalantly. Quach Phuong watched the roller coaster plummet at a terrifying speed and heard the screams of the riders. Thinking about her current health, she couldn't help but shudder. If she actually rode it, she feared she might die before she could even get treatment. She waved her hand. Let's not. I don't think this ride is very fun. Then she pointed towards the Ferris wheel. Let's do that instead. We can watch the sunset. Tan Duat looked in the direction she pointed, feeling that this woman was just as dull as ever. At 16, she was like this, and at 26, she hadn't changed. Along the way to the ticket booth, Quach Phuong saw a little girl about 5 or 6 years old who seemed to be lost. The girl's face was filled with fear as she looked around, wanting to cry, but holding back. Quach Phuong's heart couldn't help but soften, and she let go of Tan Duat's hand to approach the little girl. Sweetie, what's wrong? Did you lose your mom? The little girl blinked her tear-filled eyes and nodded, biting her lip. Quach Phuong used the gentlest tone she could muster. Don't be scared. Can you tell me what your mom looks like? The little girl seemed to sense that Quach Phuong meant no harm, and her current appearance reminded the girl of the fairy tale princesses her mom often told her about, which made her even more reassured. My mom is very pretty, with long hair, and she's wearing a very beautiful yellow dress. Quach Phuong smiled. I'll come find your mom with you, okay? Seeing the girl nod, Quach Phuong carefully picked her up. She turned to Tan Duat and said, Tan Duat, let's help this little girl find her mom first. The young master of the Tan family looked at her, speechless. She really liked to make things complicated. Quach Phuong thought that it might take quite some time, perhaps even requiring them to take the little girl to the management office to make an announcement for her family. However, not long after walking, she spotted a woman in a yellow dress in the distance, frantically searching around. The little girl also saw her mother and began waving excitedly. Mommy, Mommy, Dam is here. The woman ran over and embraced the little girl tightly. My Dam. Quach Phuong felt a twinge of emptiness in her arms, but quickly became happy for the little girl. Mommy, this fairy lady helped me find you. The woman, hearing what her daughter said, nodded gratefully at Quach Phuong. Thank you so much. It's nothing. Quach Phuong's eyes softened, and she hesitated before adding, Ma'am, may I hold her for a moment? The woman found Quach Phuong's request somewhat odd, but Quach Phuong also felt strange about it. Just as she was about to turn and leave, a small figure had clung to her leg. Fairy lady, give me a hug! Before the girl's sparkling eyes, Quach Phuong happily squatted down and carefully hugged her. Quach Phuong genuinely loved children. In that moment, tears began to fall uncontrollably from her eyes. She remembered the baby that had not yet formed in her womb and thought about how happy she would have been if she were healthy enough to bring a child into the world. Seeing Quach Phuong hugging someone else's child for so long and even crying, Tan Duat frowned. He pulled her up, apologized to the woman, and then led Quach Phuong away.